I think we're good. Looks like everyone that should be.
Okay. You want to go ahead and get started then?
Yeah, we're ready.
All right, cool. Andrew, do you have any intro remarks you'd like to start with?
Sure. Just thanks again to the DMV crew for working with us. It's been many years now that we've been working on this, and lots of improvements that we hope to show you today to make your jobs easier there, and all the feedback that you've given us over the years with Alice and everything. That's been great to use to build this. So hopefully we nailed it. And yeah, here you guys all know Larry from VHB. He's helped with Alice and those things way back to the beginning. So yeah, Larry, take it away.
All right, great. Thanks, Andrew. So good morning, everybody. Yeah, we are here to sort of hopefully put some wrappers on the on this whole thing and get you guys trained up on this new application that we're calling ICL, the Interactive Crash Locator. So the way the logistics will work is I'm going to do a combination of PowerPoint and demos, and we'll have what we're going to probably do is we're recording this session. So to keep the recording as clean as possible, we're probably going to mute folks, mute everybody for the main portion. We'll unmute for question and answers towards the end. But if you have questions in the meantime, Gary Stevens is joining me. Gary's the one that many of you know as well. Gary wrote the latest implementation of the Alice system when it was migrated off the original version. So Gary's been developing and supporting Alice for many years. So the two of us have been around for, the entire duration here of the Alice implementation. And now we're leading the design and development of Clear, which is on the final legs here to get live here very, very soon. And so ICL is the app that you guys are going to use. And so if you have questions while we're going, feel free to put them in chat. Gary is going to man the chat, so he will answer questions live. And if we can't answer any from there, we'll wait and field them when we open up everybody's mics. And then we'll have plenty of time. I don't think it's going to take all 2 hours, so I'm going to blast right through this. I think we'll get done in very short order. This is it's a very straightforward app, particularly since it is modeled after LCDE, which is basically, something that most everybody on this call, I would assume, is pretty comfortable with. So with that said, let me just jump into an ICL application overview. You'll see a little screenshot there, and we'll come back to that in a minute. So as I mentioned, ICL, that's the affectionate name for it, the short term ICL Interactive Crash Locator. It's basically going to be used by everybody on this call, right? This is a DMV app. So Clear as a platform is going to ultimately replace Alice and other applications such as Sims and Pies and other things over at DOT. And so some applications are going to be used primarily by DOT or MPOs or so on, but ICL is your app. We designed this, by the way, just as an aside, is we did not design this in a bubble or in a vacuum. Andrew and his team, ourselves at VHB, myself, Gary, and others, and had countless meetings with folks like FJ and Mike and Brian and others that are on this call that, gave all of their feedback into the design and the thought. So hopefully the functionality and the user interface that you're going to see reflects what you actually need. And so we've given great thought to that. So this is, as you can see, the first bullet. It's basically for you guys. It's the location coders, it's supervisors, and it's basically the same general premise of LCDE in Alice is that it is going to be used to interactively locate or geocode crashes that were unable to be located by the batch geocoding process each night. So very much like Alice, we're going to be pulling nightly new crashes and updated crashes and so on from AIS over to Clear. We're going to run them through a batch geocoding process and try to automatically geocode them. And basically those that cannot be automatically geocoded at night in a batch sense are going to be put into this interactive queue, and there's several of these queues here. So right here, the cases that cannot be automatically geocoded by batch are going to be geocoded, or I'm sorry, put into these 3 queues. There's the main interactive queue, which is what you're familiar with with LCDE, basically all the cases. But in this sense, we've sort of identified and segmented fatal crashes so that they can be prioritized, and commercial crashes involving, trucks, buses, etc. So crashes where a commercial vehicle was involved. So the main interactive queue, which is what you're sort of most familiar with LCDE today, is actually all the cases except those that are fatal. So basically all cases that are not fatal and do not involve a commercial vehicle. Fatal crashes are going to go into their own separate queue, and truck bus queue, as we affectionately call it, will be where the commercial vehicle crashes go. In terms of users aligned with these queues to some degree, there's 3 types of ICL users. You'll have a role. Everybody will have a login, and you'll have a role, and the supervisors will have the ability to administer those roles and so on. But basically, a location coder is the one that's going to be able to interactively and geocode these cases right out of the main queue. The interface is very straightforward. You don't have to request the next one. You don't have to click anything. They just appear in order coming out of the queue. A priority coder, anybody that the supervisors are going to assign the ability to work from those fatal and truck bus queues, we're sort of using the terms priority. They're going to be responsible for geocoding priority cases, meaning the fatal and truck bus queues. And that is just a slightly different interface where they see the actual cases in those queues. And I'll show you that later on in the training here. And then supervisors, Mike, Brian, FJ, whoever, that are in this role will be able to manage and administer the entire workflow. So they'll not only be able to process cases as they like, they can see all the queues and so on, but they're also going to be responsible for processing cases that you as location coders forward to them. So one of the processes in the middle of this that you'll see is that if you get stuck on a case, you can just basically quickly forward it to them. You can put information and tag it with the reasons and the comments and forward it to them, and that's another queue that's in their bucket. So they're going to see the main queue, the fatal queue, the truck bus queue, and they're going to see the supervisor queue, obviously. So, but what we're going to focus on in this class, we're going to have another segment this afternoon with the supervisor. So we're going to focus exclusively on location coders and priority coders. So we're going to focus on your workflow and your functionality. So when you first log into ICL, pretty simple here. You're going to get a URL when all is said and done. You're going to see a landing page, essentially, that looks like this. There's a button that just allows you to launch the app. And when you launch the app, we don't have it buttoned up with the credentials till we get to the production system right now. We have, as you'll see when I log in, we have these built-in usernames. But essentially, you're going to click this launch button. It's going to redirect you to ny.gov. Everybody's got an ny.gov login and credentials. You will type in your username and password there. Once you're authenticated by ny.gov, it'll return you back to ICL, and you will see the main application interface, and basically it will know, okay, John Doe logged in, and John Doe is a regular location coder, or they're a supervisor, or they're a priority coder, whatever it is, it'll know. So in terms of what you're going to see with this application layout and the different panels and whatnot that I'm going to show you is there's essentially 4 different main sections. So across the top, we have just the application header, and there's a couple of things like about and help and FAQ up here, little simple things, and that's how you log out. The left-hand side is the form panel, and one of the things that was a big point of discussion with everybody that I mentioned that participated in the design from the DMV side is we really need the ability to see all 3 things at once. We need the ability, ideally larger monitors are better for this, but it will work on any size monitor. But essentially, we need the ability to have a form panel, which is going to be where your location form and your candidates form show up, and we'll talk about that. The map panel to be able to, when you're seeing candidate locations that you're choosing from and evaluating, and the crash report panel. So we have a series of controls that I'll talk you through. They're up in this upper right corner right above here that I'll talk you through that allow you to manipulate. I only want to see the map. I only want to see the crash report. I want to see both. The form panel pretty much is always there, but you do have this size little sizable slider on all of these things to dynamically increase them horizontally here and move them back and forth and emphasize certain things. But great care was taken in designing this to be as flexible as possible. So not only are all these panels resizable, you can flip them, and you'll see in a moment where you can actually take the crash report and yank that out. We have a little arrow in the upper right-hand corner. You'll see you can take this out and put it in a separate browser tab, so it's basically full screen. It'll be isolated there, but you have the ability to do that type of stuff and focus on the map and the form, and the crash report being in another browser tab. So lots of flexibility here that I'll go through in a moment. Little housekeeping here with the miscellaneous functions in the upper right corner. Essentially, we have an about, which is just displays the version number and release date of this version of ICL. So if you guys had an issue you were running into, you could let DOT and us know. Look, it was version 1.72, and I found this. Can you fix this? Whatever it is. Help is essentially a online help system that'll separate or launch in a separate browser tab. It's fully searchable. It's got basically the whole user manual to ICL in it. Frequently asked questions is another little page that'll go out in a separate browser tab, and it's just sort of whatever we determine. We'll precede this with some initial things that we think are more important for you to know, but you can add to that as you go along. So if you come up with things that you're constantly finding location coders need to understand, let the supervisors know. They can communicate to us, and we can add them to the frequently asked questions. And then if you're going to log out of the application, you'll notice up here in the upper right corner, it'll show your username that you're logged in as, and it'll show here, you'll see parenthetically your role. Coder is a regular coder, priority coder will say priority, and a supervisor will say supervisor. So those roles will all stay there. But if you want to log out of ICL, you can go ahead and just click this, and it'll drop down menu, and you'll see sign out. So let's talk a little bit about the map. I just want to hit around some sort of general functionality before we actually get into processing cases. So the map window, regardless of how large it is, and you can move this around, as I said, you'll be familiar with this. This isn't unlike what you're doing in LCDE today, but it's still a LCDE is based on Esri ArcGIS technology. This is as well, but obviously this is using the latest and greatest state-of-the-art GIS technology and map interface. So what we have here is in the upper left corner is the find address or place. So if you did have to navigate around, obviously you're going to be taken. This is very contained, very controlled. So, to the extent you have to do this, I don't know, but you can. So you could type in an address. You could type in, this will go to Yankee Stadium, for example. This will an address or landmark or place name, county, municipality, exactly, things like that. You can do that. Zoom in and zoom out. I don't use this much myself. This just hitting the plus button, it just moves you in by a factor of 2, and minus moves you out by a factor of 2. I never use them. And the reason is that if you look down here, these hidden quote unquote map navigation functions that many of you are, used to as well. If you hold the shift key while you drag a rectangle, like upper left to lower right or vice versa, it'll zoom you to that exact extent or window. That's how I zoom. The other way I zoom is this bottom button or bullet down here is the mouse wheel. If you have a mouse wheel and you roll it forward, it'll zoom you in dynamically. And if you roll it back, it will zoom you out dynamically. So I use either the rectangle drag or the mouse wheel. While I'm down here, let me just mention that when you also hold the left mouse button down and drag, it'll turn into like this hand that looks like it's grabbing the screen, and you drag it around, it will pan the map and recenter it wherever you let go. So if I wanted to pan the map to the west, to go west of Michigan here, I would press and maybe hold my mouse button right here and move my mouse to the right, and it would pull the map that way. When I release it, wherever I'm centered the screen, that's where it's going to refresh. The default map view just takes you back to all of New York State. Now, once again, some of these controls are not as important for ICL as they are for other apps, but they're there, just so you know. The Google Maps is really Google Street View. So if you were to be looking at a map and you really want to get a look at the area and what's going on there, if you click this button, it's going to turn yellow and it'll turn the cursor to active with the Google Street View tool. So if I were to click it anywhere, it would bring up Google Street View at the location on the road that I clicked in a separate browser tab. This one is a special function. You've got to turn it back off. Otherwise, if you leave it turned yellow, it's sort of toggled on and it just keeps, everywhere you click, it just keeps bringing up a Google Maps. The base map gallery allows you to flip the underlying base maps. We use this thing called OpenStreetMaps, which is what you see here as the base map. That's sort of the wallpaper that's a reference map underneath everything. So the base map can be flipped to aerial photography, you know, an orthophoto, for example. You know, it's called imagery. You can flip it to other things, but the most common thing people flip it to are the imagery, to have the, you know, satellite imagery, if you will, underneath. The layer list allows you to turn layers on and off. Once again, probably not a big deal for you guys in this application, but you can turn them on and off. Legend shows you the symbology, once again, of each layer. This is a GIS with multiple layers, you know, on top of one another, but, you know, you'll get a feel for what it is because it's very specific for you guys. If you did need to measure area or distance, we have an area or distance measurement tool, the area of a polygon or the length along a line. The coordinate conversion, if you wanted to know where a specific point was of, you know, latitude, longitude, or UTM, you can click somewhere and it would tell you that. We have the ability to print a map if you needed to print a map, for example, and export something to give to a supervisor and say, you know, hey, this is what I was looking at on the screen and I just can't figure this out. You know, you could just, you know, email them that as part of a case that you forwarded them, perhaps, something like that. You can do it with or without cartographic elements like titles and legends and so on. You can just export the screen itself. This is a tool that's going to be most important for you guys. This is the user placed candidate tool. This allows you to manually place an additional candidate. So let's say you are, you know, you process the case and it runs and it calls the geocoding engine under the hood, just like LCD does, LCDE does, and it comes back and it gives you two candidates, you know, a reference marker and, you know, an intersection or something like that. You have the ability to override those and say that I really think the crash occurred here. You can click this tool, click anywhere on the map, and it will be added, in this case, as a third candidate. And we'll come back to that. We have a whole slide on that. And this allows you to pop the map open to full screen across the entire page. And override that. So I mentioned earlier how we'll be able to take the crash report and pull it out to a separate browser tab and make it as big as we can. This would allow you to essentially take the map and make it as large as it can. And it would take up the entire page, literally the entire screen, until you hit the escape key to go back. Or you can click this little button. It stays there in the lower right. So that's a little bit, and I know that's quick. Sorry to go through that so fast, but I'm going to demo all this stuff to you, you know, in a moment when we get in there. But that's a little bit about the map tools and navigation. Similarly, if you needed to click on anything, you know, this isn't quite as important for you guys, but there may be situations you can click on a crash point, but you're going to have candidates, so I don't think this is as important. But if you were to click anywhere, if I were to click off the map here, not even on a feature, it would still identify, for example, the municipality that I'm within, the county that I'm within, and if you're within or on top of a couple features, you know, it could be a road center line, such as this feature, but whatever you're on, you can flip through and it would show you the attributes. So it might show you the street name that you're actually on if you can't read it on the underlying base map and so on. So this is probably not quite as important for ICL users, but I wanted to just mention it anyways, and it's here in the slides. By the way, just mentioning that, I don't know if I got to this in the introduction and the logistics, but I will be giving you guys a copy of all these slides. As a PDF. We will be giving you the recording so you can re-listen to certain sections, and I'm going to timestamp the recording so that you know, geez, I really remember when Larry was talking about the user place candidates. I want to rewatch that. You know, I'll have it tagged and say, you know, at 17 minutes and 13 seconds. Yep.
Sorry to interrupt you. I just lost the projector here in the screen, so can you pause for a couple?
Yep, absolutely. Thanks for jumping in.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Give me a second.
Yep. Just let me know when you're ready to roll. Yeah, as you might have saw in chat, Gary had just mentioned while we were taking this little pause is that, if you have any questions while you're coming, I know that we're on mute and trying to just proceed through the presentation. But if you have any questions while we're running through this, by all means, put them in the chat. Gary's on it. He'll lead that effort and try to answer questions on the fly. So don't be shy about placing questions in chat.
You can log in from your. I can't get this projector to come back on. We're gonna have to go back up to the office. So it'll take us maybe like 5 minutes to get back up there.
Okay, no worries.
We'll just do a little
Sorry,
break.
you want to just take our 10-minute break right now and let them get set up?
Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we take a 10-minute bio break here and let us know when you guys are back.
If we stop the recording now, then we can
Yeah.
Start a new one then also and be able to trim the time out of here.
Yeah,
Can you stop that recording?
Yeah, let's stop it. And when you guys come back, if you can, you can obviously tell us, but we might not be, everybody might not be back. So maybe put it in chat when you're ready to roll. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
No
Thank
problem. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And Mike, I saw you in chat there. Thanks for letting us know. No worries. We'll, you'll have the recording obviously too. Okay. I am going to go ahead and restart officially now that we're recording. So I will come back. This is the map window tools, all the navigation oriented tools. It sounded like you heard me but didn't see this slide. I will give you this slide and I'm going to demo each of these when we process a case in a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. And then this last slide was really not terribly important for ICL users, really. It's just identifying features. This is mainly more important for what we call our crash data viewer, which is similar to the SQRA app and Alice for visualizing and querying crashes, but there may be certain circumstances where you want to click on a road center line or something to identify it on the map. So let's jump into the meat of this, which is how you process and locate a case as a location coder. I'm going to just get a couple slides here on setting the stage for what the user interface looks like and how we generally go about it. And then basically I'm going to just jump after a couple slides. I'm going to jump in and start doing some of the demo of this stuff to give you guys some context here. So when ICL is first launched and we actually get through the login screen and the landing page, you're going to basically just see the first available case come up here in the location form panel. The location form is here and basically the primary crash report. And don't worry, all the crash reports you're going to see here are all the our demo report with John Johnson from anywhere or somewhere New York. It's a dummy report. There's no PII here. But we have the location form with all the data, very similar concept to LCDE. We've got the crash report full. The map panel is initially hidden unless the case was previously geocoded. So what I mean by that is if you did have a case, the vast majority of the cases, as you know, have not. They're new cases coming in from batch. But if for some reason this is an amended report, let's say, where they changed any of the locational fields, we may have already geocoded this crash, or you may have. Maybe it happened in batch, maybe it happened in interactive, but it's going to come in here. And you would see this red note like this, where it would say previously geocoded via blank method, the at intersection method, if you can see that here. So if it was geocoded previously, you will see the map window, and you'll see 3 screens across here, little thin sliver of the map, and you'll see the point location that it was previously geocoded to. But whatever it is, 99.5% of the cases have not already been geocoded. They're new, et cetera, and they're going to come up with just these 2. Right. So when we first launch it, this is what happens. And you'll see that down here in the bottom, there's a process button and a forward button. Right. So we're going to talk about the mechanics of this whole form. But when you go to actually process this case and send the locational fields into the geocoding engine to try to identify potential candidates for locations, that's what you're going to do. You're going to click this process button, and both here and on the candidates panel, this will just flip. You'll notice up here we have a location tab, a candidates tab, and a search tab. We'll come to all these things in a moment, but when you actually process this, all the candidates that identified, it will flip to the candidates tab, and it will show you the candidates here. So once again, a lot of similar concepts from LCDE. We didn't reinvent the wheel when we didn't have to, but this is what you're going to see when you first open up ICL as location coder. So let's talk a little bit more about the form on the left. The location form has a number of different sections and controls, right? So at the top, we have a little header. There's the location tab. At the top, there's a header that contains the case number and the crash date. In the middle is where all the locational data. This is the main section of the form that has everything that that is in the crash, in the case to begin with, and that things that obviously this is all editable, like it is with LCDE, where you can manage this. If there's typos you see or different things here where you need to adjust things, you can, particularly if you're looking at the crash report in conjunction with this, obviously. If at any point as you're going through this, you start making some modifications to the fields here and you want to reset the form to the original values when you first brought the case up, just hit reset form, that button right here. Down here, there are times when perhaps something happened in a particular county and the supervisors may ask the location coders to focus on just, Jefferson County or Albany County or whatnot. This isn't anything that the supervisors have to do themselves. They actually have the ability to do things such as prioritize high priority date ranges. If something happened during a date range and they wanted you to do that, they can control that. And the cases as they come up in front of you through the main queue are just going to be in that date range. But for a county, you actually, as a location coder, have the ability to just pick a county. By default, the cases are going to come out of the interactive queue regardless of the county in the order in which they're in the queue. But if you want to focus on just a county, you pick it from here and it will pull the first record out of the queue for that county. I mentioned a minute ago, here's the process and forward button. This is the button that you kick to actually start calling the geocoding. So when you are ready, you might do it right off the bat without making any adjustments. Or if you do want to make adjustments to the fields before you call it, you can do that. But when you click process, it's going to call the geocoding engine, send all this data in. It's going to then come back out with one or more candidates. Hopefully one or more could be where it can't find any, in which case you'd have to make further adjustments to the form or do a user place point. But nevertheless, process is going to call the geocoding engine to process the case. Both on this tab, the location form, and also the candidates tab is the forward button. So if at any point while you're processing this case, you just cannot determine where you should locate it, you can click the forward button, a little dialog will come up and you can fill it out, and we'll talk about that in a later slide. Diving a little bit more into the locational fields, this form is designed, you know, much like LCDE is as well, but it's designed to closely align to the fields and the headings that appear on the actual MV104 form, right? So up here at the top, we have the county and muni, which should generally darn near always be populated. It would be a rare instance when one of those isn't. And they are both already filled out, but there are pick lists. If there's an address in which the crash occurred in front of a house or in front of a building and they noted that, you would have the house number here. This is the street or the road on which the crash occurred. This, I believe, you know, you're familiar with the term on street, so to speak. That's this. At intersecting streets. So we modeled this little section of the form very much off of almost verbatim of what you see on the actual MV104A, right? So this is if the crash occurred at an intersection of the intersection of, say, State Highway 5 and Main Street, you would see Main Street here, much like you would on the MV104 form, right? So that's where you'll see a cross. This is sort of similar to the cross street here, right? So that's where you're going to see this. However, much like the crash report itself, this offset section will allow you to put in, you don't have to, but it allows you to put in an offset of, this is the distance away. So this might say 50, and then this middle one is the units of feet, perhaps. And then this is a direction of north, south, east, west, et cetera, northwest of, and then this pick list is basically the ability to offset from either, and you see them listed, excuse me, over here, an offset from an intersecting street, an exit, a landmark, a milepost, or a reference marker. So this middle section is very much just like the crash report itself. When you are offset from an intersecting street, for example, so let's say this said 50 feet south of, and then you would pick from here, you would see this set to say intersecting street, you will see the intersecting street name here. So key difference here that's noted over here on the left is that if the crash occurred at an intersection, you should see, just like you would on the report, street and intersecting street here. If it is offset from that intersection, say it was 100 feet south of the intersection of State Highway 5 and Main Street should not appear here. You should see 50 feet south of intersecting street, and the street named Main Street should appear here. So that's how you deal with this. This is at intersection. This is offset from an intersection. Down here, you see a little square rectangle around the milepost and reference marker with a little note. And these two allow you to just denote that you don't need an offset data associated with it when you are doing a reference marker or a milepost. So when a police report comes in and it says it's at this reference marker, we don't need that. You'll see this is set to reference marker, and the reference marker number will be down here. And so this, you know, we've modeled this after the form, but obviously there has to be some flexibility. You're all familiar with the many differences of things you're going to see on an MV104. And so on and so forth. So that is some flexibility that's built in here. That's why there's a rectangle around them. These two are a little bit different because oftentimes it's at that reference marker. And, you know, so we needed some flexibility in this number 2 setting to pull that off. This non-public way is simply a checkbox that's going to signify whether the crash occurred at something that's non-public, such as a parking lot. It wasn't on a public road, essentially. You know, it's not. It's in a parking lot. It's at a truck stop. It's at a toll booth. Something where it's not really at the traditional reference marker or so on. And then the police provided coordinates, if they provided an XY coordinate, latitude, longitude, a northing or an easting, and so on. The X and Y coordinates of the police provided coordinates are here. So that's the anatomy, if you will, of the location form. It's very similar to what you see in LCDE. There's a couple of differences, and hopefully we've aligned it and made some improvements of how you would read this from the crash report, that location section that's in sort of that band across the middle of an MV104A. some additional controls that you're going to see here within here. So I just talked about the fields, but let's just talk about a few of these controls that give you a little bit more flexibility. If you need to zoom, and I believe we have the term map it in LCDE and from the old days, right? Well, we have this little magnifying glass zoom control. So if for some reason you wanted to zoom to the extent of Montgomery County, you click that right here, and it would zoom to that. Or you want to zoom to the St. Johnsville municipality boundary, you can do that. If you want to zoom to the extent of this street. Now, I believe the little synopsis of this is that if there is a house number in a street, the zoom might not be enabled, as I recall. But if it's just a street name here, clicking this zoom would zoom you to the extent of the entire State Highway 5 segment or segments. Right, so it will zoom you there. Same thing with an intersecting street. If you wanted to zoom, if this said Bleecker Street or Main Street, and you wanted to zoom to the extent of that intersecting or cross street, you could do that. Same thing with this intersecting street, which is when an offset is occurring. So if this said 50 feet south of this, you would be able to zoom here as well and see that. The map control, there's a little finger pointing icon up here on street that if you wanted to say like, this is completely messed up, I don't understand what they're saying with the street here, I'm not even sure where it is. Looking at the police report, it looks like they probably are talking over here. If you wanted to click on a street segment on the map to populate this, that's what the finger icon is for, to be able to do something like that. Okay, now couple notes here that are very important with how this goes. The street names, as you see here, are coming in from the crash reports, coming in through AIS and so on, all uppercase. The street database and street maps we are working against that New York State DOT is providing and so on, they're not all uppercase, they're proper case. So one of the things that you should note is that if you need to edit this, or if you want to actually pick from the pick list, these guys are showing as pick lists. See these little drop down arrows? If you want to actually pick a name, what you have to usually do, okay, and you don't have to do this to just click process and process a case. This will go through in all caps. But when you want to adjust the control and start saying, well, I want to actually try to pick this, and the reason that you might want to pick from the pick list is that in order to pick an intersecting street, if you are shooting for that, like let's say there was a typo and you're putting it in, this is smart enough where you can pick the actual street from the available street names in this municipality. But when you start picking that, what you're typically gonna have to do is start typing in a mixed case. So you'd have to type, state and get out of the uppercase. And when you start typing, it will, and I'll show you how this goes. As you start typing, it gives you a drop-down list of the available street names. So you can click, pick it. Once you pick it, you're going to see these little wheels over here start to spin, and it's going to populate then the available choices for what the intersecting streets. So if you typed in Main Street here and you picked it from the drop down, and then you get an intersecting street, it's going to be all the intersecting streets with Main Street in this municipality. So very powerful is that it's going to give you choices. It's going to know what valid intersections really are. So I'll demo some of this, and I know I'm sort of just talking in general here about this. Before we get into managing the map and the crash report here with these little controls, I'm going to just jump out and start to do a little bit of a demo here. So I'm going to come over to my browser. So here I am in ICL, and basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this launch button. It's going to ask me for my credentials. Once again, this is going to be an ny.gov authentication for you. This is for our development system. We're just logging in with a built-in little ID. You'll notice if you're familiar, we're using Simpsons characters as our usernames here. So yes, that is what you're seeing if you're wondering. So here we go. ICL opens. And essentially, you've got the first case at the top of the interactive queue. So here we are. We've got State Highway 5 is the on street. It appears that the law enforcement captured it right at a reference marker, and this is the reference marker. Once again, I don't have any offset information, so this is at that reference marker, and this is the screenshot that I had taken this from for the slide, obviously. As I mentioned, when you first come up, if this were previously geocoded crash, you would see that red indicator here, like previously geocoded via this method, and you would see the map as well. But if I sort of just take this little vertical slider, I can sort of expose you like there's the map, it's just hidden. So I can slide these things if I want. I can, collapse things left and right. So there's two dividers. If you see this closely, there's two little dividers to manipulate all of this around, right? But we just close the map. One of the things that I'll talk about here, I'll come back to this with the slide, but you can see here, we have a series of controls up here that allow you to click this and say, show the map. When you click that, you've got the map and the crash report up here, and you can adjust these accordingly, but that will quickly show the map. If I wanted to close the map, I can click the X and go back to my default screen, and I have other controls that I'll get into when we get to that slide. But as I was saying here, what we're doing here, and I'm going to just start processing some crashes here in a moment, but essentially what we've got here is the ability to, if I start typing in here, if I start picking in here, notice if I click the drop down that I have no results. And I'll do this on some subsequent cases, but if I started to type in more of a mixed case and maybe type the word state, et cetera, then it might start to show me, oh, state Route 5 and State Route 10 or whatever, and I'd be able to pick, and then I would see all the intersecting streets. But I don't have to do anything with this. I've got a reference marker. I'm looking at this, and so I'm going to jump ahead here, and I'm just going to go ahead and click this process case for a moment. So I'm going to jump ahead of the slides a bit just to give you a sneak peek. So if I clicked process on this, it's going to call the geocoding engine, and it is geocoded. It's found one candidate. And what you see here is we've got our candidate over here, and I'll talk about this in a minute when we go back to the slides, and we can come over here and highlight, but basically over here is the candidates tab. Notice we flip tabs, and I've got the candidate here. It's a single candidate. It's via the reference marker location method. It's above a 90, meaning it's a valid candidate. County Muni, on street, State Route 5, the cross street. I don't know why they're thinking that it's Fox Road, but it's essentially here on that's probably the closest cross street. But here is we're talking about, we're at this reference marker, right? This is it. Now I'm just zooming out here. Okay, so I'm wheeling my mouse out. So I wanted to just jump ahead and process a case so that I could see the map window with some features on it like a candidate. So once you get here, if you start to manipulate the map, once again, I'm going to just take you through a few of these controls. So once again, what I can do here is I can come over here. I could click the plus sign and zoom in by a factor of 2, or click the minus sign and zoom out by a factor of 2. I'm not going to click this. If I clicked it, it would go back to all of New York State. Well, I can click that and just do it and show you that, because basically what I can do is I'm jumping ahead again of the slides. But if I went there, if I click zoom, this is going to zoom to that candidate, and I'm going to be right back where I was, right? So you can do that, and you'll notice once again I'm ahead of the slides, but zoom all will zoom to the extent of all of these candidates. So if you had 3 all spread out along this route and it was up and down the route, for example, you could zoom to the extent that it would encompass all of them. This is the Google Street View button. So once again, if I were to click here and I said, well, I sort of want to just click somewhere around here and just get an idea what this looks like in the real world, I can click on that road. It's going to launch Google Street View, and here's what this is. And so this is a way for you to quickly look around and see what makes sense. And those of you that know Google Street View, we have full capabilities of clicking ahead and so on. And this is in that tab, and I can close it whenever I want. This is what, and you notice 2 other things that I did this on purpose is I mentioned earlier about the Google Street View window or button being enabled and staying enabled. So if I clicked down here again, or I was trying to click on this to identify it, it would automatically launch Street View again. Okay, so I need to turn that off. Okay, see, turn it on, turn it off. I need to click it again. One of the things that I probably misspoke earlier is I talked about how the pop-up window is not really terribly critical for you guys, but it is in the sense when we get to the accepting a candidate slide, you can click on a candidate here and bring up attributes about it. Now, it's not mission critical to do that because the exact same attributes about that candidate are shown over here in the grid. But it is another way. So if you wanted to launch Google Street View directly from this, you could do that by clicking on the candidate point. Up would pop this identify pop-up dialog. You could click here to launch Street View exactly at that location. And you also can accept candidates from here. So you'll see over here, we'll come back to this, we can accept a candidate as the location for this case here and here. Okay, so I can just close that window if I've got that open. Getting a teeny bit of feedback in the mic, so if folks wouldn't mind muting to make sure that we've got a clean recording, that'd be great. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so here we are, and that's the pop-up window. Now, if I move over here, what I've got here is I'm going to go to the base map gallery. Sorry, still getting a little bit of feedback on someone's mic. Here I am on the base map gallery. If I want to click over here, you're going to see that it expands out a little dialog. Here's all the available base maps. The one that's most prominent is doing either imagery or imagery with labels. So I can click that if I needed to see what's really going on in the area. This, whenever a pop-up dial or a pop-out dialog, I should sort of say, for these map controls come out, I can basically click the collapse. So expand it out, collapse it back in. So if I want to go back over to my streets, by the way, the base map that you would go back to is the one at the bottom. It's called OpenStreetMap. That's the default that we were looking at. This is the layer control. So you can see that we have our location candidates as a layer, and then we have a grouped set of layers here called the clear general layer. So if I open that up, you'll see that we have a series of layers. We have intersections, we have exits, we have reference markers, etc. As you can imagine. Those that have a slash through the eyeball, that's a similar, an equivalent of having a checkbox that's unchecked. It's off by default. To turn that on, you would have to check that. Notice that interstates, U.S. highways, state routes, and streets are all on. The eyeball does not have a slash through them. Now, why do some of these have a gray appearance to them, even though it looks like they're on? I don't see a slash through their eyeball, and that is because they're scale dependent and they're scale so that they're off. And the reason they're off is because we're zoomed in too close, so we don't bother showing the city and town boundaries or county boundaries or even the state boundaries when we're zoomed in on a particular candidate. But if I were to zoom out, I'm going to wheel out, and you'll probably see. Now, one of the things to note here is I just wheeled out a little bit, and I'm now at a different scale here, and streets turned off. So this is an intelligent map display. Now I zoomed out a little bit more, see how city and town boundaries came on, and St. Johnsville, Edmonton, and all these municipalities are here, and they're showing up being labeled. That's because we zoomed out enough to see this. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer, and these things turn back off, city, towns off, streets are back on, and so on. So that's what the layer control looks like. I've got legends here, which show the symbology of all the features that are being rendered. And then if for some reason you did need to measure the area or distance, we could click on this area measurement tool, and you click and you just start digitizing a boundary. When you're done, you don't have to circle back to the original point. You just double click to end it right here, and it locks it in. It shows that 7.01 acres. You can obviously flip to square miles or square feet or whatever, right? And so on. As soon as you collapse that, it clears the tool. We got to measure length. So if I was going to sort of just start measuring where it is, how far is it from here to there? I don't have to click here. I'm getting a dynamic measurement. But if I did want to go ahead and click, over here and over here, I can click wherever I want. And then when I'm done and I want to lock that line with multiple segments here, I just double click and it locks that. And that was 2,609 feet, right? And once again, if I reduce that, I clear it. And then this is the coordinate conversion tool. If I wanted to sort of, this comes out and it sort of, by default, it's just going to show me in decimal degrees where I am in latitude and longitude. But if I expand this down, we've got this little capture mode in the middle, which is the most handy. There's a couple little things here you can play around with. But if I wanted to say, well, where is the location right here on top of that? Let me click down here at this intersection. If I clicked right there, see how there's a little tiny circle there, and it basically locked that. And if I wanted to say, well, instead of XY, I want to show that in UTM coordinates. Well, it's zone 18, and those are the X and Y coordinates there. And once again, you can collapse that. That little dot, by the way, with this coordinate conversion tool is a little weird, is that you have to turn that off to clear that before you collapse it. Last but not least, down here, a couple things. So here's the full map view window. So the one in the lower right corner, if I hit that, you can interact with this map. All the controls come with it, but it's full screen until you just hit escape, or you hit this button again down here. If you hit it again, it brings it back in line with the application. I'm going to hold off on the user place candidate tool here, but I'm going to click the print button, and this is how you could print the map. You can export it to either a PDF or a JPEG, any image format. You can pick the size of the map. You know, letter ANSI A is an 8.5 by 11. You can put a title. If you want to export just the map only with no cartographic elements, you can flip over to that. But you have some advanced options here where you can actually set the scale. You can use the existing scale, whether or not you want to include a legend. And when you hit export, I won't bother doing it now. When you hit export, your file is going to get exported to, say, a PDF. In this case, it's going to be right here, and then you just click it, and it'll display the PDF, and you can save it and locally and so on. And you collapse that down. So those are all the map tools that I just took you through. And once again, I will put down a couple of things here. Is, you know, so if I wanted to go zoom to 42 North Pearl Street in Albany, New York, I can start typing, and as soon as I stop, it'll give me some choices here, and it's like, yeah, there it is right there. You know, I don't know the zip, but there it is, and I can zoom to there, and it will show you that, right? But once again, in this case, you probably don't have to do that a ton, but if I need to go back there, I can just click zoom and go back to my candidate over there, okay? All right, so hopefully that helps with some of those tools. Now, one of the things that I'll talk about in a minute, I'm going to go back to the location form for this in a moment, and I'm going to go back to the slides. But right here down the lower left corner, when we're on the candidates tab, if I said, you know, oh, geez, I only got one candidate, I wonder why. I thought I had enough information to get something else. You can just click this, go back to the location form, and it just flips you back there. And we're sitting here now. I can make further adjustments to the location data, hit process again, and we're off and running. Okay. So with that, I'm just going to go back over to the slides because I want to talk about the map and the crash report toggle switches. Sorry, I'm still getting a bit of feedback from one or more mics. If folks could make sure they're muted while we're on this, just so we get as clean a recording as we can, that'd be great. Thanks in advance. Oops, sorry, I just advanced. Okay, here we go. So managing the map and the crash report panels. As I mentioned, I alluded to these controls that are in the upper right corner of the application, and they allow you to manipulate when the map's shown, when the crash report's shown. Are they shown together? Are we flipping them? Are we pulling them out separately? So here are these little controls that are there. This globe will show the map if you don't see the map yet, okay? The toggle map and report will, when you're looking at one or the other by themselves, you can flip it and you can basically, the best way to, I'll show this, but essentially if you have two and you're only looking at one, it will flip and the panel will just flip to the opposite. Okay. So if you're looking at the map and you click this toggle, it'll go and flip to the report, and then it would flip back if you clicked it again. If you're looking at the crash report, and sometimes, you know, when you're viewing an image, it gets a little bit harder to read or so on. If you want to just refresh the report, you can click that, which isn't probably used very often. And this little up arrow to the upper right pops out the crash report. It pops it out to a separate browser window. Okay, and that allows you to have the crash report. You know, obviously you can't see it at the exact same time, but sometimes people want to maximize the map, but also have the crash report and be able to flip between the two, because within this little window here, it's a little bit smaller unless you're doing some really basic review of it. And when you have both open down here at the lower right, there are X's, so you could close that. So I showed this a minute ago when I opened up the map, and I said, I'm just going to close the map. If you just click the X, the crash report will be left to maximize across the whole thing. These X's are really only shown when you have multiple. And then, as I mentioned, you can use these scroll, those resizable bars to manage those. Viewing the crash report just quickly, and I'll go back in and show you this. When a case is being geocoded, what happens, that first report that displays is sort of the primary report. Remember, we can have more than one report. We could have motorist reports, we can have police reports, we can have amended reports, etc. Those of you that use LCDE are familiar with that concept. But essentially, we have a couple controls when you are viewing the crash report. We've got a previous and next. So if a report has multiple pages, which most do, you can go next, previous, and it shows you the page that you're currently viewing. And then if there are in fact multiple reports of MV104, 104A, et cetera, you'll see the a list of those right here, and you can pick and flip to a different report in the map in the pick list, sorry. And then over here on the right is a scroll bar. So obviously, when we're looking within the panel here, you can scroll up and down on the report. So that's sort of what that looks like. And then I'm jumping back over to the slide. We jumped ahead a little bit with this and we looked at this, but I wanted to just talk about this, and then I'll go back in and describe this to you in a demo. When we click the process button, that's when it calls the geocoding engine. That's when it presents the candidates. We've already seen that, right? When you have multiple candidates, in this case, in this screenshot, we have 2. You can see where we have 2, and it's sort of trying to figure out, well, which of the reference markers on which side of the highway is it, right? You see 2 push pins, you see 2 rows. If you hover, literally moved your mouse like this over any of these grids, it turns gray and you'll see a little yellow icon appear on this. It's in turn, if you hover over it on the map, you'll get the little yellow marker over top of the push pin, and it would correspondingly. So these two are linked, and when you're doing this hover. I already did the zoom buttons here to you, but if you zoom, you can zoom directly to that one. Zoom all would zoom to the extent of both of these. Then this is how you actually finish processing a case. If you want to hit and accept a particular candidate, you can accept it this way, and then I mentioned later on how you already saw that, how there's an accept button if you wanted to be completely map driven. Click on the push pin, click accept on the pop-up dialog. You can do it either way. This is probably the more popular of the two, I would imagine, is that you would just click this checkbox to accept that, and then it's going to give you a confirmation of that when you're accepting it, like, are you sure you want to accept this candidate? Each of these candidates are numbered 1 and 2, so this would come up and say, are you sure you want to accept candidate number 1, so that you don't have to remember, well, which one did I just click? So just look over here and make sure that the ID is the one that you were actually trying to choose, which, pretty straightforward, I think. If for some reason this remove button is here, so if for some reason you get back, there's a lot of location information on some of these. I would imagine that we're going to get multiple candidates. Maybe we get 3, 4, 5, and the screen gets really busy, and you're like, okay, I know it's not this, and I know I'm not using this. I don't know why they came back. I'm getting a lot of busyness here. You can hit the X button and remove a row, and it would remove the candidate push pin over here as well. And you can basically just remove it and clean up your interface if you want to disregard and no longer consider that as a really valid candidate, even though it scored high enough in the geocoder and had a confidence that was high enough where it presented this, right? I talked about the back to location form button over here, and then down here I've already mentioned a few times the forward button. So at this point, if you're looking at this and geez, I just can't figure this out, I don't think there's really enough information on the form to figure it out, or the crash reports are conflicting and it's really confusing, and I think I need to forward this to a supervisor, you click the forward button, and we'll come back to that in a moment. The last thing I want to do before I jump back in and do an actual couple geocodes for you is user place candidates. So I've mentioned to this, I've shortened this to an acronym. I think I made this up yesterday called UPC, not to be confused with the UPC code, but the location coder can actually, you can override this much like you can today in LCDE, and you can just say, I don't agree with any of these. And I think I know exactly where the crash is. And if you saw these were the 2 candidates as we just saw, and you're like, nope, it looks to me like it really occurred on the road right over where these where the overpass goes or whatnot, you can go and click that tool, come up, it turns you loose of the map, click anywhere on the map, and it will add a push pin here. And it will also add an additional row over to the candidates grid, and it will say location method used, user placed, county and muni. That's it, right? There's no confidence it didn't run it through the geocoder. You placed it. It looks like any other candidate. One of the notes here that you got to keep in mind is there can only be one, so you can't go click around. It's like you're either going to use the user place candidate or you're not. But when you do it, if you were to use that tool again, if I were to click now, click the tool and then click back down here, that one would go away and I would have a user place candidate here. So you're only always going to see one row as a user place candidate in the grid of the candidates. Okay. Then when we go to accept a candidate, right, there is the accept, as I mentioned, on the grid, and then this is where I'm sort of introducing that concept. If you really wanted to just like ignore the grid, you could click on the candidate, say, I want to accept that one. You get the little pop-up dialog, you click accept there. So either one is acceptable, no pun intended. And then once again, to confirm it, when you hit the accept button, either one of these, you're going to get a little confirmation dialog, and it says, are you sure candidate 1? That one is this one here. It's the ID. If I clicked on this one, it would say, are you sure candidate 2 is the candidate that you want to accept for this crash? You say yes or no, but if you are confirming, you say yes. And then down here at the bottom, you can just see once a candidate is accepted, the location of that point that you accepted is saved to the clear database as the actual location for that case, for that crash. And the next case from the interactive queue is retrieved and displayed in the location form, and you just work your way through it. It's very simple. You don't have to click anything else to get the next case. I'm going to come back to forwarding in a minute because I want to go out and just demo a few of these things. So here I am. So let's just geocode some crashes here and process these. So I already clicked this before. So here I am. I'm on the location form. I can look around this report. So first, though, let me jump over here and just show you what I was showing with terms of these tools. So if I wanted to display the map, which there's no reason to, I click the globe. Here it is. I can say, oh, well, I don't need to do that. If I'm sitting here and I want to flip this, so right now I'm looking at the crash report. This is the toggle. If I flip it, it just flips to the map. Now, when the map is shown, this is where I've got a couple of different options here. So this show document is if I want to add the document, the crash report, as a third panel, that's where I would click this. This toggles it, right? So every time I hit these two lines, it toggles it. But if I'm here and I click the document, it adds it as a third panel, okay? Or I could close the document here. If I flip toggle back and I'm sitting here at the crash report, instead of it being the document menu or the document icon, I get the map icon. So whichever of the two is not displayed, you see that button if you want to show it and add it as a third panel. Otherwise, you close it. So if you only want to see the form and one of them, you can hit toggle and flip between them with these two lines, okay? This is to refresh this image if it gets a little garbled or something like that. This is if you have multiple reports. Once again, we're only using sample reports with dummy data so that we don't have any PII out there. I can flip between the MV104A and MV104 and so on and so forth. The previous and next, if I want to go to the next page, here's the next page, hit previous, next. I can actually put in a page number. If this was 4 pages and I wanted to go to page 2, I can type that in and hit enter. And then if I wanted to just expand this out and pull this out, I can pop out the report here, and it just brings the report out into a full page PDF viewer in the browser, right? So here I am. This also gives you a little bit more control with zooming and panning and so on. So you get a little more control out here where I can zoom in, once again, somewhere drive, no PII here, don't worry. But I can zoom and pan around. I can flip between pages over here. I can do whatever I want, and I could leave a couple of these open, right? So one of the advantages is I could do this, and I could flip to the sample 2, a different one, pull that one out, so I could have, here's one, here's the 104A, maybe I got a 104, maybe I've got another one, and this is the amended report, or this is the motorist report, and I can sort of do that, right, and have them and just flip between them with tabs. So pulling that out is a nice little feature that we've added for you. So let's process some cases. So that's a little bit about how we're traversing through the maps and the crash reports. So I click process, and process brings me up. So with this one, pretty simple. So maybe I look at this, and now I'm looking at this, and now I'm like, okay, let me go back and look at the crash report. So let me display the document. So I see that, and now I'm looking through, and maybe I pull this out like, I need to, zoom in and look around so I could pull that out. But ultimately, maybe I say, yep, I don't have to really do anything with this. This is pretty straightforward. I don't know what the problem was, but I'm just going to hit accept. So I'm going to hit accept, and it says, are you sure candidate 1 is the one that you want to accept? Yes. Saves it, retrieves it. Down here, you get a little green, what we call a snack bar message that says the candidate was successfully accepted, and we're on to the second record in the queue. So this one is in Oneida County. It's Utica. Looks like it's at an intersection between Bleecker and Bacon Street. I don't have a lot of other information. I look over here once again, you know, in the location section here, and I go, yep, it's pretty straightforward. I think it's just simply at that intersection. So maybe I don't just anything, and I click process, and I go in here, and it calls the geocoding engine, and it's going to basically bring back one intersection. So you can see that the location method used is at intersection. It's between Bacon and Bleecker. Here's Bacon, here's Bleecker. I was like, okay, looks pretty straightforward. So let me accept this one. Notice how when I hover over this, by the way, see the little yellow icon when I come over here? Okay, so I hover over that, it gets yellow. If I go and, you know, start clicking around over here, I can bring up this candidate and I could accept it this way as well, right? So just wanted to reiterate that. I don't think this is a huge deal for whichever way you want to do it. It's entirely up to you. So let's say that I want to accept that candidate. So I'll accept it. Am I sure it's candidate number one? It's candidate number one. It's the only one, of course. Yes. Boom. And off it goes. So this one looks like we've got a couple things going on. Looks like the crash occurred on Balltown Road. Looks like it's 100 feet north of reference marker, etc. So, okay. And, you know, might be looking down here and I'd probably see the reference marker listed here if that was the case. So I want to process this and I come back and I've got, okay, this is at a reference marker. So it looks like that we've got it offset 100 feet from that reference marker. So, you know, perhaps this is all good. But let's just pretend for this one, I want to do a user place candidate. Let's say like, I'm going to measure distance, and you know, I don't know where the exact specs here. I don't want to go crazy with analysis here, but you know, maybe I'm like, you know, I really think that it's down here a little closer. You know, maybe I did a measurement or whatnot, and I'm going to click the user place candidate. So I'm going to click the user place candidate, and I'm going to come down here, and I'm like, I think it was about here given my measurement. And I click and I add a user place candidate. So here you go. So here's candidate number one, which was the offset from the reference marker. And here was, I put my user place candidate. So once again, notice how I hover over here and the yellow dot occurs, right? So I know I'm here and I like, yeah, you know, I really want to accept my user place candidate for this one. So I can click accept candidate. Notice that it says candidate 2. So I hit yes. Is there a reference marker layer that that they can turn on here? If I go over to the layers, yes. So good point, Robert. Thanks for chiming in with that. This is also a reference marker, so let's sort of do that here. So I'm gonna close the map down here, and we're gonna hit process on this one. So this is State Route 5S. I'm gonna click this. And we have reference markers. So now this is an interesting one where I got more than one candidate because it wasn't sure, you know, which one it was. So to Robert's point, Robert just asked, is there a reference marker layer? So if you come over here, you've got intersections, exit numbers, reference markers, and so on. So if I turn on the reference markers, here they are. So you can see where this is the reference markers that are being labeled here. Now, once again, this one was an offset from that. So we have a reference marker that's going in both directions here, and I don't want to get into the exact logistics of everything, but in that case, that I think what Robert was getting to is that if you were in fact saying, well, it was 100 feet south, and you're looking at the police report on that previous case, and you're looking, I don't know where they got 100 feet from. You know, I thought they typed in 10. Maybe that's a typo, and it's only 10 feet south. That's when maybe you would have wanted to measure and say, I'm going to only measure 10 feet. So you could have turned on the reference marker layer there. You could have come over here and said, all right, I want to measure, and I only want to come down 10 feet, right? Or, you know, I'm at 20 feet. I'll just do that. If that was what you were going to do, you could say, yeah, I want to freeze that. Now, what I can do to freeze that measurement and keep this on the line, like let's say, for example, that I wanted to come off 40 feet about, you know, so I can come down here and I let's just say I double click to freeze it. So I can still see how I hover, that's the 40-foot mark. That would, oh crap, I just closed it. Sorry, guys. I can come down to my 40-foot mark right around here, right? I double click. So now I could take the user place point and I can come over here and I could add a user place point over here at the 40-foot mark. So that's the example I'm doing on this one. Sorry, I should have thought of that before. But to Robert's point is I could turn on the reference marker layer and I can figure out how far down I actually want to come if I think the offset distance, for example, was different. Okay, so sorry to sort of go on too long-winded with that. So here's another example when you would want to use the remove button. Maybe you do this and you're like, nah, I don't know why I was adding that user place point. I can hit X, remove my user place candidate, and I'm back to just my core 2. So once again, as I hover over these, notice the yellow dot jumping. And maybe what I got to do is, I really need to show the report as well here. So hang on. So you click this and you do the report, and you're like, I can't read that as good. I'm going to go ahead and click the little arrow and launch this out so that I can zoom in on this. So I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to come down here, and I start reading the narrative. It's like, I don't know why they didn't really get this, but it looks like in this this section down here that it's probably over here on this lane here. So if I want to do this, I can hover over this, and it looks like, okay, well, that's candidate 1. So see how as I'm hovering, I got my mouse up here on the first row, and it's highlighting there when I'm up there, and I go up. Looks like from the police report, this is the one that I want to choose of those 2. I hit accept. Are you sure? Yes. And we're good, and we're back. Notice when we accept and and it retrieves the next record from the queue. The next record from the queue is essentially reset back to the default display, meaning that it comes back to the police report being shown for the whole panel on the right side of the form. Okay, this one's a little different. Looks like we've got a little bit of an incomplete form here. That's, we've got Markland Ave. Let's just go ahead and click this and see what it comes up with. So this is one where I'm just going to make some stuff up as we go along here, right? So this one, it saw that we had 100 Markland Ave, and it put it at 100 Markland Ave. Okay, so it's in front of that address. But if I go back to the location form, maybe I'm thinking, this was weird. And so I'm just going to make some stuff up. So instead of Markland Ave, maybe I'm reading the police report and I'm like, this actually looks like it was 20 feet north of the intersection of Markland and this other road, and I'll make it up as we go. So right now, if I go and click this, you'll see that since I have an exact match, I do have a pick list to pull from. When it can't figure this out, you may have to start typing something in here, right? So let me just make something up here. I'm going to stay with Markland Ave, but if I start typing in, and I start typing MARK, notice how it is filtering the available streets that are within the city of Syracuse down to those that contain the letters MARK. Can be in the middle. It's doing a substring search in all these, right? So I want to pick Markland Ave. Now, notice that just spun a little bit. I don't know if you notice that. I'm going to pick a different street. I'm going to go back and do this again. I'm going to type MARK, and I'm going to pick Market Street. When I click this, notice there will be a little spinning icon over here. See it? Right here, it's out and it's retrieving all the intersecting streets with Market Street, right? So that's what that little spinning wheel means. So if I go back and I say, no, I did mean Markland, I don't know what I was doing. I click that, it grabs all the intersecting streets with Markland, and it basically, this is scrollable. So Markland intersects with Bellevue, Grant, and Stolp, okay? So maybe I'm thinking to myself, okay, but if I pick here, remember what I'm doing. This is saying it's at an intersection. And I'm looking at the form, and maybe I'm reading over here and I'm seeing, no, this is offset. So this is, maybe I'm just going to make something up and say, pretend that this was supposed to be 20 feet north of the intersection with one of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually choose intersecting street. And I'm going to come over here. Now it's sort of highlighting in red saying this is a required field now. You said intersecting street. We got to have one. And once again, the same intersecting streets I have up here, I can pick down here. So I'm going to say it's 20 feet north of this intersection with Markland and Bellevue. So I would guess before I click this and see if you do this in your head, what should I come back with? I'm probably going to come back with 2 candidates. One, because we're passing all this in, one at this address using the address method, one with a near intersection method 20 feet north of here. So let's hit process, see what we get here. So it throws all that data in the geocoding engine, and it comes back with, as I said, boom, 2. Now, it's rating the near intersection as the higher confidence because the way that we have these weightings, and DOT and DMV can talk about changing the weightings and rankings and how these methods go. But when we get that detailed and get into a near intersection, and we have information like an offset, a distance, a direction, units, and an intersecting street, we have so much information that seems to be pretty precise that is coming back with a slightly higher grade than just an address, because the address, remember, we weren't offsetting from the address, we're offsetting from the intersection. So that's probably why this, if you're wondering, well, why did that get a 93? We fed this method more info, so we're going to take a little bit more weight on that guy. But we have two different candidates, right? So now if I say, oh, geez, that's, this, it's really here. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to accept this candidate here, right? So I'm going to go ahead and accept that. Is it candidate 1? So we accepted our near intersection. This one looks like it's coming back at an actual intersection, There's no offset information. I read over here. Once again, I can pull out the report. Oh, one thing I wanted to point out here, by the way, is I was just going to talk about pulling this out. Notice that this one MV104A is still open in the window. That is the old crash. So be very, very careful that if you leave these open, if you start pulling this out into a separate tab, that you perhaps, when you're ready to accept a candidate, you probably want to get in the habit of closing that. I mean, I think it would be self-evident when you started looking at it, but you never know if you get two crashes, they're in the same road or whatnot. Weird things could happen if you're looking at an older report. So be very cognizant when you're pulling that out. So here I've got this one here. So podunk. So once again, if I wanted to be sure, maybe, so let's take an example where I looked here and I'm like, I think this is the wrong, I don't even think there is a strewn road here. There probably is, but I want to just say this out loud. Before I can pick what I was saying on that previous slide, before I can pick an actual cross street for podunk, it's not going to necessarily always come up unless this is spelled perfectly. In this case, it's showing this exact thing. But if I want to see what are all the, notice I only have one here. So if I go and I actually pick Podunk Road and it spins, now I've got all them. So just be careful with that, because the first one, if you remember what I had when I was taking just Podunk Road exactly, with that one is only showing the exact values of what was already entered. Once I pick an actual street from the pick list, then it searches for all available. So don't think that in that first one, as a matter of fact, I'll try to show you this in a future example. Don't think that those are the only intersections there. So I'm going to pick that from there, and we'll go ahead and process it. But when you look at it, you sometimes will get a choice to drop down with strewn road, but it doesn't mean that's the only one. So here's an interesting one. So we've got field coordinates for the first time. So let's go back there because I didn't point that out. They have provided what looks like UTM coordinates here. So I've got a northing and an easting. And this is the first one what looks like we might have valid coordinates that actually came back in and as a candidate. So we have an intersection at intersection, and we have field coordinates. So once again, let's process it again, call the geocoding engine again. We're going to get the exact same two candidates, and they're very close, right? So if I start, zooming in, and we can only get so close on the map here, right? And I could maybe I want to turn over a base map and sort of see what this is. And maybe I say, well, the at intersection is right here, but, hey, they gave coordinates that look like, it's a little bit off the intersection. So, maybe I'm going to, use them, or vice versa, whatever you determine. And once again, you could put a user place point up here closer if you think it occurred towards the north end of this intersection. So I'll go ahead and just accept this one randomly. That's okay. So once again, candidate was accepted. So this one looks like a really weird form with lots of empty information. So who knows what we're going to get here. We might not get any candidates. So here's an example where we're getting something that is I've got a municipality, and we're like, this isn't really good. I don't want to do this. So I go back to the location form, and maybe I start reading over here, and I'm like, okay, it looks like what they started to fill this in, and it looks like this is, I don't know why Miles is here. It looks like we got some data entry. So I'm going to type in, and I'm going to say, maybe this is supposed to be, based on the police report, 100 feet south of the intersection of State Road, and so I'm going to pick intersecting street. And once again, State Street Road, I don't know, I'm going to just start typing here. State Street Road. Okay, so here it is. So once I pick this, it's now going to populate these with all the intersecting streets. And now I look down, and I'm just going to make something up and say, maybe what we really were looking at is the intersection with Stump Road. And this would be basically you reading all this over here. So then I click process, I come over here, and hopefully we got a candidate. And now I've got something a little better. I pretty much had to do a lot of heavy lifting there in the form, obviously, but now I look at it and I just display the report again, and I see the candidate, and I reread this, and yep, okay, that looks good. I think that is indeed where it is, so I'll accept that coordinate. And then this is where we wanted to sort of land here, is that now there are no more crashes in the queue. So if, I highly doubt that you're going to end up here, but we have exhausted the entire the main interactive queue. And if that were the case, boy, we'd be doing pretty good, right? And but I just wanted to show you that that's what you would see if for some reason you work through this. So anyway, coming back over to the slides, to forward a case to a supervisor, and I meant to forward that case. I got ahead of myself and got too fancy with that, but that's okay. We have another course. I'll forward a case as a priority coder here in a minute. So if you were going to forward a case, if you can't figure it out on both the location panel and the candidate panel, we have a forward button. And if you forward it, you'll get as a little pop-up dialog that says, hey, what is the primary reason? We've got a few in there, like not enough information, wrong street name, whatever. You pick that, and then you put in as detailed a comment as you can for the supervisor to guide them, because they're going to end up having to process it. And you click continue. And once you click continue, that case is added to the supervisor's queue, and the next case from the main interactive queue is presented to you. So forwarding a case is just like accepting a candidate. It's going to just go and move on to the next case once you're done with it. Okay. So I'll show you an example of that. So a couple other things that I want to do here is just show you how might you, if you had to search and geocode a single case. Suman just mentioned the screen is frozen. I'm not sure if I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. Apologies. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to try to share the screen again and see if this helps. So Suman or others, hopefully I'm going to click to this next screen. Suman, would you mind putting in chat? Looks fine. Okay, thanks, Gary. Okay, so what if you have to find a single case? A supervisor, somebody comes up and says, hey, I've got a case number. I want you to go through and just jump right in and code this one. You can search for a specific case. You have a search tab, and you can basically enter a case number or a document ID. So if that's the case, what you'll see is instead of the location form, you can come over here and click search, and it'll give you a case ID and a document ID to search on. Okay. So what you have here, for example, is if that exists, it's just going to populate. Instead of you working on that case from the queue, you're just going to basically identify this. It'll populate the location form with that case or with the case with which that document ID is associated, which is the original doc ID, that the case got entered with for the crash report. And you can do that. And when you do that, and I'm going to just hit escape and come out and show you that. So let's say I come over here and I search, and you'll see that I've got a case number here, and you can enter in a case number here, which is obvious. But let me, I'll go ahead, since I don't have a case number here in front of me. I'll enter a doc ID, which is something we haven't shown yet. So I can enter a case number, or I can enter a doc ID like so. And I hit find, and it's going to go out there and it's going to find this. So in this case, it found the case that is associated with that document ID, and it pulls it up. You can see that this case was previously geocoded via a user place point. And so maybe what the supervisor is asking you to do is essentially re-geocode this case. Maybe there was some issue with it. And then you can go through, and it's the same thing, right? So we've got it zoomed in here. We can display the crash report for it. We can close that and display the map and all the regular stuff, right? We can process and forward this. And, while I'm here, I might as well go ahead and forward this, and I'll show you this example so I don't forget. So once again, all the regular stuff here, we can click process. We start to go and look, and we'll see what comes up for candidates with this particular case. So here's an example where it's like, wow, okay, gosh, we got all sorts of candidates. No wonder somebody went with a user place point way back when, right? So we've got an address, we've got another address, so it's getting confused between whether it's South or North Central Avenue. Notice that the information that's coming back here is telling you the information with which it is found the candidate. So we entered in back in the location form, 365 South Central Avenue, and the location coder is saying, well, let me process it again, is actually saying, well, I've got, just to be clear, I'm getting a reasonable hit for a candidate at 365 South Central Ave and 365 North Central Ave, and it might be because the zip codes, if you see, is different. The way the location coding method is doing, it's saying, I'm going to show you both, and you can choose. And you guys have probably some experience with how addresses go, but this confidence is 84 because it doesn't meet, it's the North Central as opposed to having the prefix addressed properly. And then we've got this other one, which is in a different, it's in Hartsdale, New York. So there's all sorts of weird stuff going on. And so let me use this as a good example of saying, okay, I got asked to do this case. I entered the document ID number. I brought it up. Here's the case number here, right? And I'll copy this in case I want to use that again. And then I can say, well, okay, I'm going to forward this to the supervisor. So I'm going to forward this, and this is what happens in the dialogue. So I can say, all right, well, I can say, I'm just going to put, not enough information, whatever. And I'm just going to put for the supervisor, multiple address candidates are found many miles south are several other candidates, whatever you want to say here. And I'll just put that in there, right? And then I'll hit continue, and it says, whoops, I had an error with forwarding that crash. Sorry, I don't know what happened there, but that should forward and basically automatically just put it in the supervisor queue, and I'll come back. I'll try to forward another one in a minute here. So don't worry, this is our development server. You will not be getting errors when you forward a crash when you get there. And notice that when we get done with this, we also could close this since I found this crash with the search mechanism. So if I close this, it's saying, yeah, go ahead, and I'll hit continue, and I just go back out here, and so on. So one of the other things that I want to do is just the last few things that we wanted to show you here, and we'll still be able to wrap up. I only got 2 more slides left. I think we'll be able to wrap up in just a couple minutes and open it up for questions here, is I want to just talk about identifying cases as a priority coder. So once again, when ICL is first launched as a regular location coder, you just get the first location form from the queue. As a priority coder, so if the supervisors assign anybody the ability to geocode fatal or truck bus crashes, you are going to see this interface when you launch. So you're going to see this little home tab that says you've been assigned a priority coder. Please review this, and you're going to see 2 tabs with a grid display listing each record, each case that's in the priority queues, either fatal or truck bus. To process a record from the queue, it doesn't automatically appear. You literally click this little process button, and it just opens up the location form, and everything else is identical. You can actually use the column headers here to sort the queues. It's not going to physically sort, it's just for your presentation. So you can sort in ascending or descending order on any column. You can filter by a crash date. You can find a particular case number in here, and so on. So if you were to work through, now this is a more likely scenario that I said before, if you were to work through the priority queues and have nothing left for you to do in the, they're a priority. So that's where if you're given the fatal queue, you're probably intended to go through that. If you exhaust that, it will tell you this, hey, your work in your priority queues is finished. Click the Get Next button, and it will go back. It will revert to regular location coder mode and just start working out of the interactive queue one by one. And that's what it'll do. So before I say wrap it up and say thank you formally, let me jump over here, and I'm going to log out of N Months, who is a regular coder, and I'm going to log in as C Wiggum, another character, who is, I have assigned priority coder access. And the priority coder access looks like this. So as I showed in the last screenshot, it does not come up with the crash report and so on and so forth. We have an extra tab over here called Home, and it says, hey, you've been assigned work as a priority coder. Please review these queues. So I have 1 record in the fatal queue. This is the truck bus queue. Now, you may be assigned 1 or both queues. So the supervisors have an interface in their administrative panel that allow them to say, Johnny Jones is going to be a fatal coder and Jane Jones is going to be a truck bus coder, or they could assign both. So whichever queues you've been assigned as a priority coder would appear here, one tab or the other. So everything about this, so I don't have more than one queue here, but I can click filter, and I can filter dates on these little icons. Obviously, in this fatal queue, you'll see the crash flash classification is fatal. If I wanted to, sort by county or something like that, I can. When you click a column header, it sorts in ascending or descending order. You got the case number, just some basic stuff here. But to actually process one of these, you click edit, you click the process button, it comes up. You go ahead and you process, you're good. But notice what we have here is we always have the grid being shown here. So we have this, and it just looks a little bit different. So when you're doing this, what you may have to do is you have this dividing line, so you can move this up and down. There's a little arrow here that allows you to collapse the queue, or you can click this up arrow to expand the queue. So you have a little bit more busyness to the real estate over here on the right side of the screen. But, let me just try to see if I can effectively forward this crash, and I'll pick wrong street name and put, there is no street called Main Street. I don't even remember what the street was for this crash in whatever, Albany. Hit continue, and that one successfully forwarded. No idea what was going on with the last one, but we just forwarded a crash, and that would end up. Now, as we go through here, so then we've got the truck bus queue over here, and I can click this and work through this. Same thing. So basically, and I can click close on these. We have an additional close button over here. So once again, we click close, and we've got that guy over here. And so basically what you're looking at is on the regular location coder interface, we have a process and a forward button. Priority coders and supervisors will have the ability to just close this and not deal with it and just come back out and click on a different one. You have a refresh button here on the queues to refresh it. So over here, I actually think there's something going on here with this, actually, Gary. Make a note of this, is that we forwarded this crash, so this should not be here. Sorry for the live demos, always have weird things when you're on a development server. But just to make it clear, this should have gone away as soon as we forwarded that crash or this case, because we did, in fact, process this. So this should be forwarded to the supervisor. And it should be in the supervisor queue, and it should not remain in the fatal queue. So we have that here. But nevertheless, that's how you process things as a location coder with priority access. So with that, I will indeed come back over to my slides and say thank you for all the patience and listening to this. I hope that this makes sense. I hope that it helped give you a sense that it is very much like LCDE, with a lot of hopeful improvements on both the data and the functionality and the user interface side. I will be giving you a copy of these slides. We will be giving you a copy of this recording, and it'll be time-stamped, and hopefully that'll be some good reference material for you. I'm not sure if there were any chat questions that Gary was answering for you, but if anybody wants to fire a question away, I'm happy to answer what I can.
Hi, Larry. This is FJ. Can you hear me?
I can. Hey, FJ, how are you?
Good. That was excellent. I think it's vastly improved over LCDE, and we will certainly talk as a staff and put together any questions we might have, but I think we look great moving forward. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, FJ. Yeah, and obviously, you were involved with the design and all this stuff. So I'm just hopeful that, the interface and the functionality that we all sort of put together to, as a team hits the mark for you guys. But if there is any feedback, certainly any questions, let us know. Any minor feedback, any minor cosmetics, we can still address at this point. Minor, I will put that, in capital letters, minor. We could tweak a little bit, but for the most part, we're still weeks away from going live. We're sort of still massaging our exact launch date for this, but we will give you plenty of time to hit against some of the test servers and practice on this as we move forward. We're just at the final throes of getting this to a production environment. So so feel free, FJ, to collapse any questions into a master list. I know some people might have similar questions, but fire them over to Andrew or us, and we'll address them, and we'll get you guys this material, the training recording, the timestamps, and the slides, within a matter of the next week or so. We'll fire this over, and you can review it and re-listen to things and so on. I know we'll. Sorry, I'm not sure if that's just some discussion in the background or a question.
No, probably just background noise.
Yeah, probably just background noise. I think so with FJ's comment, I think what we can do is why don't you guys talk amongst yourselves, consolidate some questions into a master list for us and fire them off. Thanks for the kind words and the positive feedback, FJ. I really do feel like we've got a really nice product for you guys to use. So for the supervisors, FJ, and anybody else that's going to be on that one. So at 1 o'clock, I think it is, we've got, is it 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock? We have your supervisor session, which should be very quick. I'm not really looking to repeat the stuff that we just covered. It's really supervisor specific stuff. I'm going to stop sharing so I can flip open my calendar here, but are you guys all set for that, FJ? Or anybody else?
We are at 1 o'clock.
Is it 1 o'clock? Yeah, and I think it's going to be. We are not going to need 2 hours to get through all that, as you can imagine. And you guys have seen that I've done a little bit of early technology transfer with you guys, so it's a much smaller set of content, so should be okay. So with that, thanks again, everybody. I really appreciate the attention and the patience. Hopefully, we've hit the mark here. Shoot us off questions and. We'll wrap up the recording here and send it off, and then FJ will see you guys at 1 o'clock.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Wayne, for the comment here in chat. All right. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Larry.
Thanks, Larry.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.